So recently, I think uh, Polygon is kind of created like a chain development kit. The idea for us is essentially, as we started more as a side chain, then pivoted like through few parts and essentially reached here. The idea is right now there are a lot of things that are moving right now in terms of the way this chains and the infrastructure is being built and what's happening right now. So let's kind of lay the land here. Is essentially you have a lot of layer 2 chains and stack, which essentially ends up fragmenting a lot of liquidity across your chains in the Ethereum ecosystem, and it kind of even trickles down to the others also. There are a few where the security is not as what people promise. You end up fragmenting the whole block space, because a big part of like being a layer 2 or building some of this is you want to have uh, at least a unified block space. And essentially then there are multiple topologies that people end up using, which ends up confusing people because not everyone is kind of, let's say, technical. And like in Web3, I think we will love to make names. We have made up so many interesting names, but we don't spend enough time to explain some of this, so eventually it ends up hurting the adoption. And I think essentially what we are trying to do, and when we created this Polygon Chain Development Kit, the idea is we can stick to something which is which is kind of more longer term, which is more modular, and gives you the flexibility to kind of ensure that this is the name that stays, because we are also one of the culprits here in terms of naming stuff like in the past, with so many things kind of moving, and that's part of how the ecosystem has evolved. So this is kind of where the ecosystem is, and I think this is what we have been trying to build. It's essentially it is a chain development kit, which is sort of a modular stack. Think of it as your Lego pieces of components for all the infrastructure, for you to build your own layer 2 chains. And what does this mean? Just to break it down, it means this is you can create your own ZK based L2. So your security comes from the validity proofs that are there. You get your own dedicated space. You get to choose your own configuration. Think of it like, you are kind of entering, let's say, a cloud architecture like AWS or a GCP kind of a thing, where you get to customize what sort of stack and architecture that you will have. And that's kind of the intent. So be it from a staking perspective, what's the staking token you want, what's the cash token you want, what is the type of bridge you want, what are the clients, what virtual machine, what even data will layer in that sense. Because I think a big part of this cost is also kind of depending on what the trade-off is you want. You kind of choose that. And I think from our perspective, the whole idea is we want to bootstrap the liquidity between, let's say, Polygon and ETH. And I think this is one of the major things why we have kept it modular enough where people can benefit from each other. So as I mentioned earlier, more from the fragmentation part of thing, you can have a more unified liquidity. And I think right now, largely between ETH and EVM is where I think 80 to 90% of on-chain liquidity is kind of present. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons where you would want to start from. At the same time, build like the fragmentation doesn't get solved by itself. A big part of here, and this is where I think our expertise from our team in the ZK and the prover and things that we are building comes in. So creating a sort of a safe interoperability layer, which I'll touch base upon in the next slide. And at the same time, you have the ability to customize your stack and chain. So that's very simply chain development kit. Think of it as a customized way to create your own ZKL2s and kind of own your block space. Uh, Now, how does some of this thing work? Although I mentioned the interoperability, the fragmentation that we are trying to solve, it works essentially by this. Imagine I think probably for people who are watching would be good to focus on the diagram. Imagine there are a bunch of chains. Right now, I think we have at least 20 that we have announced. So Immutable, A star, Canto, and that is something that we'll cover up. But these are all different chains you build using this stack. Individually, they have sovereignty. So that means they are on their own and they are kind of their own chain. They have their own ecosystem. But collectively, from a block space perspective, from a liquidity perspective, we are trying to aggregate this using a ZK proof. And this is where the aggregation layer kind of comes in. And without delving too much into detail, a very simple idea here is each of this, that's why a ZK based L2, which proves validity proof onto this layer, and eventually we generate a recursive ZK proof that eventually settles on Ethereum. So all the chains eventually get security from Ethereum. At the same time, they have a very safe interoperability and a cross-chain finality between them. So there is a free fund of assets across this ecosystem. So what this enables us to do is move assets and messages, any arbitrary messages between the chains very easily. And that's how you achieve the interoperability layer. And the other kind of second order effect of this is this cross chain finality that ends up happening at the aggregation layer, because each of these chain are generating their own ZK proof and validity proof once the state transitions happen. Just by kind of judge by allowing or checking the validity of it, you can essentially have a cross chain finality. So your two chains can talk to each other, and it opens up a space where it feels almost near like the same sort of block space. Although it's obviously sovereignty, so you get the best of both worlds, where the asset movement is very easy. It's very easy to get the liquidity on chain. At the same time, you can talk to each different chain by at the same time having your sovereignty. And yeah, I think this is the larger, I would say, the architecture that kind of defines as well. The idea is you onboard, and I think this is where I think this probably would make more sense. Here, this doesn't only stop at your own layer two. This also includes your existing public chains, which includes even Polygon POS and Polygon ZKVM. That is one of the two of our public chain. And at the same time, you can have as many chains that you want. So you are basically scaling horizontally, at the same time allowing people to kind of get access to the liquidity. So from the perspective of the chains, you are able to bootstrap on day one, which is kind of very important, because a lot of on-chain like there are a lot of layer ones and layer twos and things that have been created, but they're not able to bootstrap, let's say, liquidity. And I think a big part of why a chain dies is there's not enough on-chain activity. And I think that's the fundamental problem. Like this sort of architecture kind of helps. uh, so now, putting this all together, right? What does this essentially mean? And I think the way I kind of define, I think the way we think about it is right. Is essentially uh, right now you want people to be using more stuff on chain, and then there are multiple problems, including like user experience problem, not having enough dApps, not having enough use cases, and bunch of stuff. But I think the most important thing right now is a big part of what makes on chain is like you need to have liquidity on chain. And I think from that perspective, we kind of think of like chains as kind of the new tokens, where imagine like 2015, when there were like it was like just when Ethereum had started and few things were just moving around. It was very tough from a technical, like, to deploy even an ERC20, ERC721, or an NFT, until, let's say, few things kind of evolved. And I think right now that is what we are seeing from a chain perspective, where there were a lot of projects, including us, that have started like 4 or 5 years ago, but it was very tough to build your own blockchain. And if you start thinking from that perspective, it shouldn't be that tough. So I think from that perspective, how easy it is to deploy a token at this point, be it a NFT or an ERC20, it should be as easy to deploy your new chains, and kind of get the sort of customization. Because the reality is, be it like, let's say, whatever you're trying to build, you need like a certain way where you can customize your own stack, that helps you create things the way you want, that helps you give the best user experience for your user. At the same time, you are kind of part of this larger unified ecosystem, where you are able to get a lot of network effect from the ecosystem that you are in. Right now, I think it's a very fragmented ecosystem, and it becomes very tough for people to kind of build on top of it. So I think this is what eventually is what is happening, and this is part of our roadmap with Polygon 2.0. For the next 2 to 3 years, you will see a lot of these things kind of getting built slowly, starting with Polygon CDK. And I think this is where it all starts for us. So yet you can have all the network effects of the good work that has happened so far in the Ethereum space, in the EVM space, and this goes even beyond EVM. This goes even like, that's where we have projects like Canto from the Cosmos ecosystem, or A Star from the Polkadot ecosystem, and few others that are kind of in pipeline right now. And then that's kind of the idea. Having said that, this also allows people to have that EVM equivalence for just maybe one or two things, which is you want to ensure that you're able to get the developer network effects in the developer infra that has like been built for EVM, because it is probably one of the most mature ecosystem in terms of the amount of developer mindshare and power kind of goes into it. And we can argue along what are some of those performance metrics, but the reality is this is where I think it's the most mature in terms of anyone wanting to build an on-chain thing. EVM developer tool set is probably the best right now, and I think that's kind of what essentially you get when you build with some of the stuff. At the same time, you can customize your DLA, and I think this is one of the things where right now, because of the way layer twos are kind of kind of the rage, and like people have been talking about it, the DA layer and like the good work that Celestia and like few others have kind of done in the space is create a good education around it. And I think right now people want that flexibility of the DA layer by themselves, so that they publish the data to a chain, and at the same time ensure like there are certain security trade-offs are also ensured with that. uh, this is the other thing for us is essentially obviously the security, because when you are building some of these moving pieces and components, you want to ensure that security is absolutely there. So I think firstly that's where I think being a layer 2 definitely helps, because a big part of your security is inherited from Ethereum, and I mean like actually Ethereum, where to some extent having Ethereum as a DA layer is also important. And I think that's where some of the final finality kind of comes in. At the same time, lot of this code base that uh, is being done by us, and has been multiple and audited by multiple folks from the community, as well as like from your trusted auditors that are there. There are multiple audits that are done, and I think that's why we take the security very important in that sense. At the same time, we are doing all this from an open source, so the whole goal is the community kind of gets involved, and it kind of helps and like self-regulate some of the stuff, because the best way to build out is in open and doing it open source. So I think this is kind of our way, because a lot of things in Web3 and crypto has been built, which is open source, and I think uh, we intend to keep it that way. And I think that's where a lot of our prover designs and a lot of the L2 stack itself, or the new VM with Maiden that we are building, it's all kind of being built open source. In fact, with few of these things, we are actually discussing right now directly to discuss it with the community directly on the dev Discord that we have. So with Polygon Maiden, that's kind of what's happening. So I think our goal is to kind of combine people, so you have like a collective way where all of us are solving problem together, and at least that's kind of the intent. And at the same time, I think from our perspective, a lot of this thing is enabled mainly because of ZK. So Polygon 2.0 is basically going all in with ZK essentially, because of the security that it provides, because of the way it provides the scalability that you need, and at the same time allows you to have that flexibility to kind of build your own stack the way you want. And although I keep saying like Ethereum and L2s and things, I think just to put in perspective, this is not just for that. I think it is not only for the layer 2 builders. That's why I think if you see the kind of people that are building right now, it's Canto who has built like a custom sort of Cosmos and Evmos sort of a chain. With the same time, A Star, which is more of from a Polkadot ecosystem, they're all sort of building their own sort of versions and connecting to the aggregation layer, and building using the CDK stack. At the same time, I think right now there's a proposal live on Cello also, where I think they are exploring like using that prover. And I think that's the beauty of the CDK stack, which is it allows you to customize stuff. So for example, with Cello, I think there are a few things that they have already done from an architectural perspective, but there's a scope of them for using a ZK prover, and we have a proposal live there. And I think that's the intent. The goal here is essentially be able to bootstrap your own chains when you create, have your own sovereignty, have the ability to move assets very easily, and that's where the interoperability comes in a big part. So you get the customizability, sovereignty, and the liquidity that you need for you to do so. So as an app, or as someone who's building a project on this, you don't have to worry about the infra, because like not everyone needs to build this thing, and that's kind of where we are hopefully combining together. These are some of the ones that are there live, and it's a bunch of different folks. So Immutable is from one of our like they're building a gaming CDK chain with us, and have onboarded almost 100, 150 games already with that. IDEX is one of those OG sort of perpetual protocols, and then they are kind of creating a IDEX CDK chain just specifically for perps. Gnosis Pay is one of the best ones that I personally also love, because of the fact that they are building a consumer pay, building like almost like a self custodial banking, using like their safe and like the Gnosis Pay thing. So they're building a Gnosis Pay CDK stack with a Nexon is one of the largest AAA gaming studios in gaming. They're building a lot of their games on top of the stack. And at the same time, Newbank, Capex, Palm Network, which is very well known for like some of the NFT stuff that they've done. And there are many more. These are just a few of them. So I don't want to be disrespectful for others also, but this is what we could fit in the slide. So that's it. But since then, more than I think 20 plus projects have publicly announced, and there are almost 50 to 70 that are in pipeline that we will see more and hear more about soon. Yeah, and I think the intent is let's make something together, and that's kind of the vibe that we want to probably live with and build with open source community.